Hello everybody and welcome back to World of Warships Legends. My name is Spartan Elite 43 and tonight we are taking our very first look at the brand new legendary tier cruiser, the Jinan. So, with that being said, let's look at our commander. We're running Chen Xiaoquan as our commander. We have Francesco Mimbelli and we have Albert Gleaves as our inspirations. I'm running Beyond Range. I did go for the Blind Justice here solely for the extra cruiser concealment. And then, of course, I've got back in stock for extra torpedoes. You could swap this out for like Velocious or something, but getting the torpedoes back is hilarious. Torpedo Chaos also for a little bit extra torp madness. I haven't had a chance to use all the torp reload boosters yet. Every game that I've been in this ship has been a raffle stomp, so haven't really got a chance to really use this ship for what it is. But we got a fun match to show you guys anyway. And then I'm running fully packed for extra heals, extra smokes, and extra reload boosters. So with all of that, let's look at the equipment. We are running the AA Guns module for those random times where you occasionally run into carriers. This thing does have really good AA, so extending the range of that is going to help shoot down a lot of planes if you get into a situation where you're going to need it. We also have the Propulsion Mod 2 on because a lot of the time you're going to be coming in and out of stopping behind islands and smoke screens, so being able to speed up quickly is definitely beneficial. In the next slot, of course, we've got concealment. That is this thing's bread and butter. If you get seen, you got to get jiggy with it. It's not the most agile cruiser in the world, so being able to, dictate engagements is going to behoove you. And then for the last slot, you could actually have your choice here. There's a lot of different modules here. I went for the extra main battery range, and I don't know if that's the right call here. We didn't do a whole lot to buff the dispersion, so this thing fires incredibly fast. This is basically an Atlanta-class cruiser at legendary tier. It fires 5-inch guns every like 3 seconds. It's kind of crazy. So keep that in mind. You could go with AA again. I don't think you need the extra damage here, so I wouldn't recommend this one. Gunfire control system mod, again, not a bad one to go for. That's what I think I went for. I know this is a legendary or epic module version, so this is the same thing. The torpedo module, that is something that you might want to do. Or no, actually, you don't want to do it. I misread this. Get your torpedoes back, but they are more likely to be taken out. And these torpedo launchers are already very capable of being obliterated if you take any hits from HE. The ship doesn't have any hit points, so anytime a module gets hit, a lot of times you're going to lose it, specifically the torpedoes. You've got 4 torp launchers right in the middle of the ship, and they don't take much to get knocked out. And then, of course, main battery mod 3, you could go with this if you want. I don't think you really need to. They already fire incredibly fast. Firing faster doesn't really... It's what do you call it? It's limited returns, right? Like, it's diminishing returns. That's the word I was looking for. As you buff you already have a 3.3 second reload time with this build, so you don't really need to buff the reload any further. It's not really going to behoove you to do so. You're not going to gain a whole lot out of it, but you could get a little bit more out of a lot of different areas, but that's just my personal opinion. You can take it for what you want. But with this build, we do have 4 smokes, 3 repairs, and 4 torpedo reload boosters. So pretty nice there. Notice I'm not running Epic Battle Booster. This thing already has really good range, and the range is basically what I would consider unusable range at this point. So you'll notice I'm not running like Kuznetsov or anything like that. This thing is in Atlanta, and if you've ever shot in Atlanta, you know that beyond like 13 kilometers, it is almost impossible to land consistent hits unless the target is just stationary, right? You basically got to aim at what their grandchildren will be doing in order to get the thing to hit targets. And even battleships is going to be a struggle to hit consistently. Now, the more you get into the ship, the more you use it, I'm sure you'll get used to it. But yeah, for now, it's kind of rough. But we are running the Italian Unity flag because if you squint just right, kind of looks like a Spartan helmet. And we are running the 4 Elements premium camo for the ship, just to show off that as well so that you guys can see that. For specs, if you've not played any of the Pan-Asian cruisers up to this point, don't start with this one because you're going to be in a really bad way. I recommend you play the line up to this point so that you get an idea of what they are before you get into a fight, okay? because taking this thing into a legendary tier and only having 40,000 hit points is rough. Now, you could buff that using like William Sims instead of like Mimbelli, for instance, if you wanted to go that way. But yeah, I use Gleaves because Gleaves is going to allow us to have a little bit longer torp range. I use these torpedoes a lot for area denial. You cannot torp destroyers with these. These are deep water torpedoes. There's a lot of people who still get this wrong. You cannot torp destroyers, so don't try to torp places that the destroyers would be going. Torp the places that you know that people start moving. And anyway, so 39,000 hit points with 19% torp reduction. You don't want to be taking torps in this thing, trust. Main guns, 127mm 54 caliber Mark 42 dual purpose main guns. You got 10 of those, reaching out to 17.4 kilometers with this build. But again, hitting anything beyond like 15 kilometers is basically impossible if they're actually moving. Reload booster, 3.3 seconds, or the reload time is 3.3 seconds base. And that's why I say buffing your reload really doesn't do you a whole lot of good here, because you're not going to gain that much speed, right? 180-degree turn time. These turrets are like instantaneous. They are a dual-purpose armament, meaning they rotate very quickly. They have to be able to, because they got to shoot down planes, right? HE shell maximum damage is 1,800 with a 9% chance to set fires. And then, of course, the AP shell maximum damage is only 2,100. So most of the time, you just want to rely on the fires, right? You want to rely on the HE doing things. Now, you're going to shatter a lot of HE. 5-inch HE doesn't really do a lot of penetration at legendary tier, but setting fires all day long is something that you can do. So buffing the fire chance is something you could do as well. But again, for me, I wanted the extra concealment, so I went with this. Torpedoes, we do have them knocked out to freaking 15.3 kilometers. The base reload is 112.8 seconds, but you do have 4 torp reload boosters. And then, of course, the speed is 69 knots. Nice. And because they're because they're deep water torps, they're pretty sneaky at 0.8 kilometers. By the time people see them, it's too late. Right? AA defense. You've got 76.2mm 70 caliber Mark 37 mod zeros. You get 14 of those, doing 248 damage per second, reaching out to 4.8 kilometers with this build because we buffed the AA range. And then, of course, you have the 127mm 54 caliber Mark 42 dual-purpose main guns that do 175 damage per second and reach out to 6.2 kilometers. Maneuverability, maximum speed 35 knots, so not the slowest thing, but definitely not fast. The turning circle is probably what's going to get a lot of people in trouble here. Rudder shift isn't that bad, but it's not amazing, so you may want to consider putting rudder on this. But again, I think propulsion mod's going to do you more in this particular ship because you're going to be stopped a lot. So being able to get up and moving is going to save your life. Turning circle, 670 meters is it's okay, but it's not amazing for a ship that's this squishy, okay? And it is squishy. Concealment, though, is 9.8 kilometers with this build. So that means you can potentially get within, radar range of a few cruisers before you get spotted, right? It's kind of crazy. But 6.5 kilometers by air, guaranteed is always 2, and 6.2 kilometer smoke firing penalty. I think that's absurd. I think that a 6.2 kilometer smoke firing penalty for 5-inch guns at legendary tier is stupid. Literally every destroyer in the game has like a 3 kilometer smoke firing penalty. So why does this cruiser have such a high smoke firing penalty? It makes no sense. Especially when you got ships out there like the Colombo with 16, 15-inch guns that have 11 kilometer freaking smoke firing penalty. Like, come on. These are 5-inch guns. Your smoke firing penalty should be much less. Yes, you've got a lot of them, but still. It's ridiculous. Stats-wise, I haven't had a great time in this. Like, it's not that I haven't had a great time. Like, I'm doing what the ship is supposed to do, which is set fires and try to torp things. But as you can see, main gun accuracy has been abysmal because every game has just been a raffle stomp of everybody running away. I haven't had very many opportunities to stand and fight with people and let them, like, just burn or eat torpedoes. I just haven't had a chance to do it. But in 7 battles, it's a small sample size. I see the potential of this ship in the right hands, but I also figure that most people are simply not going to do very well in this ship. It's too squishy, it's not particularly agile, and it is very much going to be a Mino situation where most of the people that jump in it are simply going to just be cannon fodder for everybody else. And then the good players, there's a high ceiling here. I think this ship has the potential to be absolutely devastating for a team. but it's very, very hard to carry in the ship just due to the fact that if you have to spot your own targets in this thing, you're in trouble, right? And that goes for the entire Pan-Asian line. So anyway, moving on. Average damage 65,000. That's not too bad. A little bit low, I think, for a legendary ship, but again, haven't really had a chance to utilize the ship a whole lot, so there's that. Potential damage against me is only 500,000. Again, that showcases that you're not wanting to be shot at, right? That's about as high as a destroyer, to keep that into perspective. And then obviously we get some damage for spotting as well, because this thing is very concealed. You can use it to spot. Specifically in those instances where there aren't destroyers around, you can outspot most ships in the game at that point, and just use yourself as extra eyes. Armor, you don't really have a lot of armor. It looks like you do, but trust, you don't. The bow is 16 millimeters, okay? 16 millimeters is only big enough to not be overmatched by a 8-inch gun, right? Anything bigger than 8-inch guns will go right through this thing like butter. Okay, so keep that in mind. But other than that, we do have a little bit of armor here that isn't terrible, question mark. It's 32 millimeters, but again, that just means you're not getting overmatched by the big guns, right? But if you look, it is very flat, and most of the time, any sort of big guns or any favorable angle, they're not going to need to overmatch you. You're going to get clapped. This will help against cruisers, specifically in up-close battles when you're going to have to get into some pretty nasty fights. But other than that, like, you're going to take some serious damage if you're taking hits in the ship. So best bet is to simply not take hits in the ship. And it does have an above-the-water citadel as well, so just adding insult to injury in case you thought that was an armor belt. That's not. That's your citadel. It is an exposed citadel, meaning this thing can be citadeled potentially with HE if you can pin it. So Conquerors and even SAP probably can citadel this thing as well. So pretty crazy in that regard, but yeah, it's to be expected at this point, right? Anyway, repeater equipped or can be equipped with torpedo reload booster. If you do it right and you drop off of one side, flip around, drop off the other side, hit the reload booster, there is a potential to drop 40 torpedoes into the water. Those torpedoes each capable of doing almost 20,000 damage apiece, moving at 69 knots and reaching out to 15 kilometers. This thing should terrify you if it spawns into the game, because until you know exactly where it's at, you better be ready for torpedoes, because there can be a whole bunch of them and they'll be on you real quick. They're not the fastest torps in the world, but when they're spotted, it's a little too late. But deep water torpedoes, again, they're harder to spot, but they cannot hit destroyers, so keep that in mind. I cannot stress that enough. A lot of people, I see it a lot. I even did it myself once, where I tried to torp into the middle of the map on northern waters, because I was trying to counter destroyers, and then I remembered, oh yeah, these are deep water torps. It doesn't work like that. But modest guns, that is the big deal. These are 5-inch guns, okay? So again, anything with any sort of armor, you're not going to pin with the HE most of the time. You're going to be shattering a lot. However, you can do damage to superstructures and so on. Plus, if you get an opportunity to use the AP is actually surprisingly good. You're not going to likely citadel a lot of things unless you're like point blank against a cruiser, but the AP is no slouch. If you get an opportunity to use it, you can stack up a lot of damage real quick with this fire rate. So if you get an opportunity to use the AP, highly recommend it. We'll showcase a little bit of that in the video. Jinan, a variant of the light cruiser developed in the United States at the end of World War II with reinforced torpedo armament. She was designed in 1944. Again, she's an Atlanta-class cruiser, okay? That's a tier 6 ship that was a destroyer scout when it was built. And she's literally a AA cruiser, right? So keep that in mind. That's what this thing's role is. But the memes are there, okay? It's a meme boat. And it's pretty good at the Daka if you can get into a good position. But other than that, I mean, it's an Atlanta class. I do like the skin, I'll be real honest. It's kind of an odd, like red fading out to white-ish. So I don't really know about that. The turrets are the interesting thing for me. They kind of look like the frog. You guys ever see the old cartoon frogs? That's what they remind me of. Or a Buddha cat. If you guys know what I'm talking about, like the Buddha cat that like has a little golden cat with his paw up, the Buddha cat, kind of reminds me of that too. But other than that, she's a solid looking ship. I mean, she's essentially American, even though it's Pan-Asian. So let me know what you guys think, and with that being said, let's get to the gameplay. Alrighty, so we're going to be on Sea of Fortune, and this one's going to be an interesting battle, folks. You know, the other day when I was like, hey, you know, we're stuck in and we're calling for help and nobody showed up? Yeah, that's going to be this one. That's enough. You thought it was a one-off thing? No, everybody knows nobody actually helps each other in this game. That would be absurd. But in reality, there are actually people helping. They're just not coming over to help me. Which I don't have a problem with because they managed to keep themselves at least relevant. Okay? So with that, let's get right into this. Now, right off the bat, you're going to see me immediately turn to the left. And you'll be like, well, Spartan, what are you doing? And the simple answer is, I want to dump torpedoes. And I want to dump a bunch of torpedoes. Mainly, I want to dump 40 torpedoes into that gap. So the first 10 are away. We're going to double all the way back. And this is what I'm talking about with that turning radius. Yeah, this thing moves like a battleship or a very large cruiser. And given the size of the ship, it shouldn't move this way. It just does. But what do I know? Anyway, as we move around, we're going to go ahead and try to dump the other side of the torpedoes away. And I was initially thinking about using the reload booster here, but then I elected not to. Now, I will say this, 4 reload boosters is absurd, and most of the time you're probably not going to use all 4 of them, meaning that if you ever see one of these things launching torpedoes at you, just assume that he has a reload booster ready to go, okay? Now, one of the things that I think that this thing is going to be really, really strong in is a division. And why is that? Because fully packed exists, right? If you get in a situation where you have a teammate, A, spotting for you, or B, just somebody nearby you constantly that you can use fully packed with, oh my Lanta, you're going to have a good time. Because this thing is going to be able to reload smoke screens very quickly. It's going to get its torp reload back very quickly. All the things. It's going to be absurd. But right out the gate, unfortunately, the Yama is just a little too far to be outside of our torp range. But the next part that I want to remind everybody is what seemingly gets forgotten at Legendary Tier, because there is no Atlanta at Legendary Tier. There's some cruisers that like to pretend they're Atlanta, and they do a lot of damage, and they can shoot over some things, but no cruiser in the game can shoot over the stuff that this thing can shoot over. And I do mean that. This thing can absolutely rain shells from the moon. Meaning if you think you're safe, you're probably not. But as we finally get a chance to DAC it, you'll notice I do use a smoke screen. And some of you guys will be like, well, Spartan, why are you smoking up when you're behind an island? Simple. Somebody behind me was spotting me through the gap into Charlie and Bravo. That gap over there was keeping me spotted, and some folks shot at me. And I think we can all agree when you only have 40,000 hit points in a dream, you don't want people shooting at you if you can avoid it. So that's what we do. Now, Loria makes a critical error here. He was safe behind the island, but as soon as he comes out, it's game on, sunshine. And the DACA will commence. And like I said, you may not pin all the shells, right? Like, you may not do all the damage with the shells pinning, but you will be setting fires. You're just going to be sending so many shells downrange that fires are inevitable. Now, we are going to get spotted here, but you'll notice that we only get spotted for a short amount of time. We are aware that other people are ready to shoot us. There's several cruisers over there, including a couple of Zows. So we want to keep that in our head. But as we pull through, watch what happens next. I'm going to be slowing down, using the island again. We outran the first set. We got very lucky here. Fortunately, this was a Zao shooting me. If that was the Yama that hit me right there, I'm a dead man. But it wasn't. But as we just sit here and roast this Loria, like, we're going to start to notice a couple of things. First of all, is that we're not getting any help. The guys are literally going to sit over there in their little spawn circle forever. And the next thing you're going to notice is a Zao. Now, Zao is usually one of those cruisers that people like to try to bully people with, right? Zao is a pretty solid cruiser. However, Zao is about to get a lesson in DPM. And we are going to absolutely burn this man to a crisp. We are going to make him regret life choices. But then we see the Yama is actually pushing forward. And that's not ideal either. So we're going to move forward. and use the islands for cover, but I have to be very aware of the fact that there's an island right to my left. If I screw this up, get spotted, I could easily end up getting yeeted. The guns are going to be your primary source of damage in this particular ship, unless you get a match full of absolute imbeciles who don't pay attention to where you are and sail in straight lines for a long period of time. Because if they do that, you're going to be able to catch people with torpedoes. And we're going to go ahead and drop some torps out there, just make sure that folks are aware that I do have them. And you can see I am just measuring everybody up. And that's the other thing you get to do with this, is because I have the range so long, I actually get to measure people and see what they're doing. Oh my god, the Zao was crazy! What, you didn't like me absolutely embarrassing you with HE? That's your gig? Well, I'm sorry, Sunshine, but you just pulled out in front of the wrong torpedo swarm, Sunshine. Also, I have AP too, and you're broadside. And we hit him with the torp and kill him with the AP. Now, you'll notice that we pinned most of those AP shells, right? That just goes to show you, people will sleep on the ship's AP, I promise you. There will be people who will go full broadside in front of you, assuming that they're going to be, you know, safe, and you'll be shooting HE. I'm telling you, do not sleep on the AP. The AP will absolutely punish people. If you've ever seen me embarrassing hippers and Mogamis and stuff with the Atlanta, you know exactly what I'm talking about. People will sleep on this thing, and you will be able to absolutely embarrass them, and there is nothing better than getting a broadside with this kind of DPM. Now, you'll see that the Yama out there, he took a torpedo, so did the Zao. So we know that this guy's on a cooldown. Now, what I should have done here is switched over to HE, started farming him again. But you'll see somebody else hits him with HE, gets a fire. And so we're actually spotted by the Loria here. Now, Loria is aware that I have torpedoes, and this is the other thing that this ship is going to do for folks. And remember, we have a very not good smoke firing penalty for these 5-inch guns, so I can't fire my guns, unfortunately, or I will be detected. But we go ahead and use the smoke screen, and you know what's going to happen. These guys are terrified to come at me for rightful reasons, right? Like, if they come at me, they die. No ifs, ands, or buts, and I'm not going to lie to you. I was salivating at the opportunity to take down 2 of these battleships with a torp rush. You can see I'm setting myself up to have torps off the right side and the left side, right? But unfortunately, that's not what's going to end up happening. Now, the Yamato, I mean, he comes out, he's still broadside, still sailing in straight lines, still thinks he's that guy. We're just going to sit in our smoke screen. We already had the HE, or the torpedoes on the way. We spread it out so that if he maintains course, he dies, and if he slows down, he dies, right? That was the goal. And because these are quintuple launchers, they spread out quite a bit. There's a very small area that he could have potentially escaped from these torpedoes, but yeah, it's not likely. And he's such a low health at this point that any torpedo is going to lead to death. And so we end up taking him out. Now, I wasn't sure exactly where everybody was, but I wanted to make sure, as Zao was thinking about pushing, I wanted to have the torps off the left side ready to hit him as he comes around the corner. And you can see, as he's thinking about it, he's slowing down, but unfortunately, the freaking Loria has doubled all the way back and has now put himself in a position to be a problem for me again. But he did just fire, so we're okay, we know that. We've still got AP loaded, and watch the AP here. That's 5 full pins on the broadside of a battleship. He takes a shot with AP, and thankfully I had used propulsion mod and was able to go forward fast enough, and all he gets is a few overpins and no real damage. But he is going to be fast enough to get ahead of those torpedoes, unfortunately. But as we are sitting here trying to, we were hoping somebody would show up to help. But the Zao, he ends up coming around the corner. Obviously, they dodged the torpedoes. He waited long enough, which is fine. But I am now anticipating a second close quarters engagement with a Zao. And surely this guy will have learned from the other Zao, right? That you don't just charge in full broadside against a DPM cruiser like this. I don't care what ship you think you're in, it's usually not going to end in your favor if you fire every 7 seconds and the person that you're shooting gets to fire every 3. And there's a huge difference in the amount of guns that we have as well. I say a huge difference. It's not a huge difference, but look at that. 5 full pins right there on a slightly angled ship. But you can notice I'm aiming up, trying to get as many pins as possible. There we get a couple of shatters on his belt. But as he opens the angle, it's just a matter of time. Now, I'm trying to stay angled as best I can, use the guns, and we're able to take him down. He gets the double fire, we go ahead and use our heal, and we use our damage control, and we are still fine. And the best part is, I have an island, and he can't torp me. Right? Now, that brings us to our next point. This thing does not have the ability to have hydro. So assume that if you're sitting in a smoke screen that you need to protect yourself from the direction that torpedoes could come from. Because just like any other time, as Mr. Jingles would say, smoke screens are torp magnets. I screwed that all up. I'm sorry. But I am no mighty Jingles. Shocker. Anyway, as we push up, we see that the Loria does get himself spotted. We knew he had passed in front of us, and we knew he was probably sitting there because he wasn't spotted. So we're going to go ahead and load up the HE. We do have a smoke screen ready to go. I want to kind of go around this corner. We have an out where we can use the corner of the island and then drop a smoke screen. He's far enough away that we can actually fire our guns and not be detected at this range, which is what I would consider preferable. But unfortunately, I don't know if he thought that somebody else was spotting him or what, but he decides to YOLO forward just in time for me to get into position to potentially be able to farm him, and that kind of screws my plan all up, which is really, really unfortunate. But he also manages to go full broadside, lose all of his hit points immediately. And you can see as we fire HE initially, we're trying to get those permafires going. But as we come around the corner, we're also going to end up loading AP. And the good news is, because of the fast fire rate, you can see Yoshino goes down, Loria gets the death strike on him. But as he goes full broadside, we get the fire. We're going to go ahead and switch over to armor piercing once again, just to reiterate that you can absolutely use armor piercing in this thing, and you will be able to pin most of your shells if you aim properly. Now, we are going to shatter some shells on the belt here, but again, we're going to pick up the kill just based on being able to aim. And at these ranges, you should be able to aim pretty easily. It's just that once you get outside that 12-kilometer range, that it gets a lot harder to hit consistently, especially on a target that doesn't want to be hit, right? But with all of that being said, there's only one person left. Our team did a pretty solid job overall. They managed to get cap controls. We held our flank at all costs. And this is something that I think would have potentially lost us this game. If I didn't hold that flank, we lose, I think. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe our team would have stood on their head and they would have done good things. We'd have had the caps, so maybe we win on points. But it would have definitely been a bigger challenge for our team if I had failed to hold that flank. Being able to be in a position to stop the enemy's advance is where this thing is going to shine. Now, obviously, if you can get into a kiting position where you can maintain not being spotted and dumping torpedoes, and then using your smoke screens effectively to be able to DPM people, you can do a lot of work. Now, here you can see, I go ahead, I'm going to drop the torps off to the left. Now, again, I have 3 torp boosters. I didn't get a chance. I used one of them. Right? The entire game, I got to use 1 torp booster. And this is what I'm saying about these torps. Building into the torpedoes isn't necessarily the greatest, like, be-all, end-all ever. But you can see his smoke screen isn't moving. So I decided to throw these ones back there just in case, right? He also has short-duration smoke screen, so it's unlikely that he stays hidden forever. And then I just start shooting into the smoke screen blindly because you have that DPM, like, it's not going to hurt us. We just figure we might be able to find him in the smoke screen, but yeah. By the time that those shells get there, unfortunately, he's going to get spotted, and our Yamato is just going to do Yamato things and send the broadside cruiser to the Shadow Realm. Nighty-night, sunshine. Blunk. But yeah, overall, I think this thing is a fun ship. I don't like it for myself because it just doesn't fit my playstyle, but it's got a high skill ceiling. The better the player that's playing it, the more effective this thing is going to be, and it's going to be a nuisance. But I think for the average player, I said there's probably going to be a lot of these things getting absolutely bullied out there, just like every other Pan-Asian cruiser. You've got the people that are very good in them, and then you've got everybody else. And I am in that everyone else category. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments below, and if you like what I'm doing, punch the like button, leave a comment below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and as always, I will see you in the next video.